I'm working on piecing together my blocks. So now I have I'm doing small blocks first. They're constructed the same way. So the main thing I would look at is every fabric that you used as one of the star points is going to be used twice because of the way the blocks are constructed. So each fabric will show up twice, like this is here and here. So I want to make sure that well, I'm going to try to make sure those aren't used in the same block. If they are, it's not the end of the world. But I am going to look at trying to get a little bit of balance so that there are some darker, lighter prints, and it's kind of mixed up because you want to create some visual movement with that. So what I'm going to do is sew together these, and these first, and then I'll add the third row. Is I do pin mine, especially these little ones. They may seem like because they're small, you don't really need to pin them. But maybe because they're small, you really do need to pin them. And what I like to do, I've shared this tip before, is I like to have the point. Anytime there's a point of a flying geese or a half square triangle, I like to have that go through the machine first. So I'm actually going to put the background square on the bottom. And then I'm going to sew them together like this. And then for this one, this doesn't matter with points, but I do like to have this seam on the top so that it's less likely to get folded over like this when it's going through my machine. And I'll have to fix that. So this one is a little bit of a longer seam, so I'm going to use 3 pins. I'm going to pin at the beginning. I'm going to pin at the end. And then I'm going to pin at the middle. Pinning helps distribute the fabric evenly as it goes through the machine, but it also helps keep both layers of fabric lined up so that you get an even seam allowance on the top and the bottom. And this bottom piece doesn't slip down a little bit. So it does make a big difference. So I would advise not skipping that step, but do what you want to do. So I'm going to get all my small blocks laid out, and then I'm going to sew them all together. I have my blocks here, the small ones. I have sewn them into rows. So I've got the top of the star, the middle of the star, and then the bottom of the star. So now I'm going to sew these together, and I'm going to start with sewing the top to the middle. So let me show you how I pin. Smaller blocks tend to be trickier to get everything lined up, so don't stress too much if things aren't perfect. So I'm going to put a pin at the beginning. I like to, anytime I have a seam allowance on the bottom, I try to put a pin to pin it open because I press my seams open. Now I'm going to pin at the end of the block. Now I'm going to, once I've pinned at the end and the beginning, I'm going to pin at the seam intersections. So there's one right here. Got that pinned, and then there's one right here. And then I'm going to pin right here in the middle. Just like that. So I'm going to pin all of these, and then I'll sew and press, and then I'll pin the bottom, then I'll sew the bottoms on. All right, I've just finished making my small star blocks. So when you're done with these, if you're making the big ones, you're done with the big ones. If you're making the small ones, you need to add these little filler rectangles, one on each side, so that they're the same width as the bigger stars. So I'm going to sew one onto this side, and then I'll press it, and then I'll sew one onto this side, and then I'll move on to my big stars. All right, I now have all of my quilt blocks made. I've had a ruler sitting on these, and I promise that it is worth it to do this when you have flying geese, because it really helps to flatten the flying geese so that the seams will sit nice and flat when you base your quilt. So I've got my small stars, which should be the same width as the large stars, and I'm looking forward to putting this quilt top together next week.